Okay, so I'm going to go right ahead and start off by sharing my screen. And I will also momentarily put in the chat. Oh, sorry. What am I sharing? Not my screen. Hold on. Let me do that again. Share. Here we go. That looks right. Okay, there we go. I will make this a little bit bigger, but I definitely invite you to also be in the doc if you like. And so during our time together, I'll make this document accessible for everyone, and then it'll close after after the session. I will not be able to respond to share requests, so just know that Mara will send out a PDF. So let me also just put that link in the chat. Okay, and I will adjust my screen so I can see as many of you as possible. So bear with me as I do that. Whoops. Okay. So as you can see, we're in the midst of we're at the end of the book of Exodus, and this can be a little bit of a tricky part in the Torah because there's a lot of instructions about how the Mishkan, the tabernacle, should be built. And it's basically an architecture manual or like a, technical writing about how to put together and dismantle the Mishkan. There's some really interesting stuff within those directions, and I hope we'll explore some of that today. But you can see we're at the very end, Exodus 30. We're in the second to last Torah portion of the book of Exodus. And today I want to bring in both texts from our Torah portion this week, Vayekhel, which means and he gathered. Moses gathered the people together to provide instructions after God had given him instructions. And I want to explore some of the verses about wisdom. So we're going to see different words used to describe maybe different skills or talents or wisdom. And I want to think about how those words are being used and what the messages are, not only of those words, but of a few phrases and key ideas that follow. So we're going to look at all of that together. And you can see, you can see the question in front of you: what is needed in addition to wisdom or as part of wisdom in order to build sacred space? And how do we apply these messages in our lives today? And what is wisdom? The first question. So the translation you'll see here is Robert Alter's translation. There's, there's lots of translations for the Torah, and we're going to use this one today. So I'm actually going to read the text out loud, and then we'll take it from there. So Exodus 31, God spoke to Moses saying, "See, I have called by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God, with Ruach Elohim, with wisdom, b'chokhmah, uvitvuna, uvida'at, with understanding and with knowledge, uvachol melacha, and in every task, to devise plans to work in gold and in silver and in bronze and in stone cutting for settings and in wood carving to do every task. And look, I have set by him Ohaliav, the son of Achisamach from the tribe of Dan. And in the heart of every wise-hearted man, I have set wisdom, that they should make all that I have charged you." So this is God speaking to Moses in last week's Torah portion, saying, in order to build the sanctuary, the main person in charge, and also his assistant, and then other people too, they all need wisdom, a spirit of God, understanding, knowledge with every task that they go about doing in order to build this Mishkan, the sanctuary, to devise plans or to think thoughts or to plan. And then there are some specifics listed. And then we get this phrase that I've also given to every chacham leiv, to every wise-hearted person, wisdom. So a little bit of repetition there. There's a footnote there because in the ancient Near East, the heart was thought of as the seat of our thoughts. And so Everett Fox, for example, translates wise-hearted, I think, as wise-minded. So we can think of it either way for now. I don't want to get caught up in which is correct, but for now, we can think of it as whatever makes the most sense to you for now. So at first, these are all the qualities that are needed in order to build the sacred space for the Israelites. And you can see here, Robert Alter says he wants to understand what is chokhmah, wisdom. He says, another translation is practical wisdom. He says wisdom and its synonyms suggest both mastery of craft and also something like insight. So it's a little bit vague of a definition, and they even seem like two separate things. But for now, we can sort of, because there are lots of different kinds of wisdom described here, we can think about wisdom and the synonyms mentioned as including some kind, the way we think about wisdom today, not just knowledge, but some kind of, life experience and insight, and also some kind of skill. And now, based on some of the commentaries here, we will, well, soon in a moment, we'll see how some of the medieval commentaries understand this. But I also want to jump ahead now after seeing some of the initial descriptors for what a Mishkan builder should be like. I want to see how those builders and how the participants in bringing together the items needed for the Mishkan, how they are described in our Torah portion this week. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. Also, again, Robert Alter's translation. Take from what you have with you a donation to the Lord, whose heart urges him. Let him bring it, a donation of the Lord, gold and silver and bronze. And every wise-hearted man among you shall come and do all that the Lord has charged. And every woman wise-hearted with her hands upon and brought the threadwork of indigo and purple and crimson and linen, and all the women whose hearts moved them with the wisdom spun the goat hair. And Moses said to the Israelites, see, the Lord has called by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, from the tribe of Judah. He has filled him, I forgot to make this blue in English, he has filled him with a spirit of God and wisdom and in understanding and in knowledge in every task. So we get some repetition at the end of toward the end of the chapters about building the Mishkan. Not only did we get the directions last week, but now people are rearing to go. They're starting to work, and the women are mentioned in particular, and they're starting to bring donations. You can see I took snippets of pieces from our chapter from Exodus 35, but as some scholars have noted, this phrase in Hebrew, nediv libo, I just invite you to imagine that it's repeated multiple times here. It's not only said once in verse 5, but throughout the chapter that describes people moving forward and actualizing the directions that were given. The idea that someone's heart has to move them in order to participate in this is key. So before we actually go on, and there's a little bit more here, but I want to pause here. Before we actually go on to read some of the commentaries and to try to understand a little bit about the significance of the terms that are used here for wisdom and also the significance of describing people as willing to give. And also, we read at the very end that Bezalel and and Ohaliav also have to be good teachers. They have to inspire and teach their staff what to do. They can't just take on all the work themselves. So I want to pause and ask for a few of your reactions, perhaps, to all these different kinds of descriptors describing the skills or different kinds of wisdom, perhaps, that are needed for the building of sacred space, and hear your thoughts on what they might mean. So maybe you've seen some of these texts before, maybe you've read some of the commentaries, but whatever you're coming in with, whatever knowledge or whatever your senses of what these words mean, I'm curious to hear from a couple of you. So feel free to raise your hands, your raise hand function, and I can go ahead and call on you, Susan. And Susan, thank you. Just before folks, before we hear what Susan wants to share, I do want to ask if it's at all possible for folks to be on camera this morning. I know people are busy or perhaps at work. I want to share. I think that would be wonderful. So so Susan, we'll turn it over to you for a moment.
It sounds like the people not only have to know what they're doing, but have to want to do it and do it knowing it's something sacred.
Okay, that's interesting.
Not just an everyday job.
Not just an everyday job. They have to be aware that there's something special or sacred going on here. That's really interesting. Okay. Susan, what you said kind of made me think about this distinction that we often talk about in Jewish life between teva and kavanah. There's this idea that we go about certain parts of our Jewish lives, our ritual lives, by doing things in perhaps a rote kind of way. But then we also have to ask ourselves, what kind of kavanah can we bring to our daily rituals? And maybe there's this really interesting tension in our chapters here about participating, bringing contributions, but also what we're supposed to, the demeanor, the affect with which we're supposed to contribute. So Susan, thank you.
It sounds like you need both.
Yeah, it does sound like you need both. Thank you. Okay, Arnold and then Kathy, and then we're going to go on.
Yeah, I was thinking that these people, the work they had done previously had been as slaves to build things for Pharaoh. And, I imagine to some extent they hated the work, or at least they saw no benefit to them for it. So here I think God is trying to spur them on, or Moses is trying to spur them on to say, here's something you can take great pride in. And perhaps he's flattering them a bit also by saying, show your your wisdom to participate in this. And it just seems like that's a big thrust here.
Yeah, I love that. It's really interesting thinking not only about the very internal demeanor affect, as I said, that a person should cultivate, but also thinking about the way in which we say things to other people to make them feel good or to inspire them. Not necessarily, it's interesting, is that manipulative when managers or leaders say things in a way that will get them to there's a book called Getting to Yes that will get them to yes, they'll get their staff to yes, or should we in general, even if there may be an element of kind of finagling a situation in order to, I'll use the Yiddish there, in order to get people to feel good about something, is thinking about who they are and their life experience, Arnold, as you mentioned, what would inspire them. So that's lovely. Thank you. Okay, and we're going to call on Kathy, and then the rest we're going to go on. So Maya, I'll ask you to lower your hands for now, and maybe you'll get to speak later. Okay, Kathy.
Thank you. Good morning. I think the really important part here is everybody coming together as one, working together as one. They are all part of a whole. They all make up what's going on here. And with one person not there, it's not complete. And so everybody is equal in bringing something to participate And no one's greater than the other. They're
Hmm.
all equal in this participation.
It's interesting, Kathy. I was trying to think about, at first I was thinking, oh, I want to know more about where she sees that in the verses. But it sounds like
Mhm.
in the idea that we're like, for example, in verse 10, every wise-hearted man, chol
Right,
chacham lev, shall come. So
right,
there's this every wise-hearted women, all the women whose hearts moved
right,
them. So there's this inclusivity about everyone
right.
being able to contribute. Yeah, that's lovely. Okay, this is why I
Yeah.
love my Jewish learning Parsha teaching, because I love learning from all of your each of the three of you said something really interesting and different, and thank you for really beautiful contributions. Okay, I guess pun perhaps intended contributions. So let's read a couple of medieval commentaries, Rashi and Ibn Ezra. And I want to share that some of the commentaries on these phrases in here and this vocabulary are actually, rather than in our Torah portion, because they're repeated, we have to go back to Exodus 31 to last week's Torah portion, but there are commentaries in both places, and I'll say I think I chose some of the ones that were more interesting. Some of them are, I didn't find them as interesting, but I certainly invite you on Safaria or whatever other commentaries you may have at home to check out. There are lots of them, the many commentaries on these verses. So I'm going to go ahead and read Rashi, the early 12th century, late 11th century medieval French commentator. Chokhmah, or wisdom, what some translate as practical wisdom, is what a person hears from other and learns, perhaps makes their own or internalizes. Tvuna, the next part of verse 31 of verse 3 in chapter 31, understanding or discernment is understanding a matter from one's heart with insight out of or deducing it from the things one has already learned. Da'at, knowledge, which we might think about it just as basic knowledge. Rashi says, no. Knowledge is holy inspiration, Ruach HaKodesh, understanding something in a spiritual way. So, even way before people talked about multiple intelligences with that English phrase, we can see in Rashi this really fascinating distinction between each kind of learning, just levels of learning, that at first when we're sitting in a class or we're reading a book or we're listening to a podcast, we hear something and we're thinking about it and we're able to make it our own. But then we're not only able to somehow integrate it, assimilate it into our schema, into the ways that we organize knowledge in our own minds, but also we're able to somehow learn from it, gain insight from it, develop wisdom, maybe connect our emotional and intellectual faculties. And then almost on a whole different level, says Rashi, is da'at, knowledge. So, again, really interesting ways to think about what's required when we bring together our contributions, when we try and build sacred space or community together. We have to bring in our life experience and our knowledge. And also, that wouldn't be enough to really build sacred community. We also have to bring in our insights to contribute, and maybe even, a sense of, and maybe this should go first if we're talking about da'at is the way Rashi understands it, but certainly our spiritual selves, our sense perhaps of a much bigger picture, that we're part of a bigger picture. Okay, so one more here, maybe two more, and then we'll pause again. Okay, Ibn Ezra, the Spanish early medieval commentator, says he wants to know more about what does this phrase mean. In the heart of every wise man, I have set wisdom to do work. One finds in human nature that what can emerge from one's heart are things of depth in the work of measurement, like design and architecture, without ever having studied this chokhmah. Okay, I just want to read that again. One finds in human nature that what can emerge from one's lave, what we think of as heart, but really what meant minds in earlier times, are things of depth, deep things, serious things, in the work of measurements, like let's say design or architecture, or maybe the sciences or engineering, without ever having studied this. So on one level, this seems a little bit opaque, but I think what he's saying here is that we all come with natural and innate talent. And certainly, we go to school to build our skills, or we learn from, we're apprentices in various ways. But we have to face the reality that we're not all going to be great at everything. And we all come, even in things that are highly technical, people come with a natural ability to do something. So as we think about sacred community, we can think about different kinds of knowledge and affect, heart and mind, and also talent. Okay, one more, and then we'll pause. Okay, so from chapter 35, verse 34, when we read that Bezalel and Oholiab also have to be able to teach, not just do the job themselves, they have to be able to teach to their staff what to do. So Ibn Ezra says, in addition to the talents or skills that God gave Bezalel, God put in Bezalel's heart, the ability to teach. Okay, this is one of my favorite commentaries ever. That is to say, there are many wise people who teach, but do so with great difficulty. Now, Oholiab was Bezalel's colleague or peer in all the crafts and in all the skill of teaching to others. Therefore, it is written about both of them that they are capable of any kinds of workmanship and that they can skillfully plan and design. So part of their innate ability, or part of what God gave them, or a part of their skill, was not only an ability to do the work themselves. They had to be able to share their knowledge with others. And this is just so just a great line that Ibn Ezra echoes what people knew many years ago too, that it's hard. It's actually hard to be a good teacher. Certainly, if there are other teachers on the calls, there are skills that we can work on. But even people who are knowledgeable are not able always to be the passers on of knowledge and teaching skill. So everything that we've seen so far in chapter 31 and in chapter 35, and then these commentaries that echo all the different kinds of knowledge, talent, and the ability to share and inspire others, I would suggest are required in order to build togetherness and to go through an initiative together in order to bring about a positive result, perhaps what we are terming here sacred community. So I'll pause here, and I also want to just mention again the three things that were said earlier, which I think really were beautiful and contribute to our sense of what's required here in coming together. Perhaps both keva and kavanah, the idea that we have to come with a certain affect or demeanor, and also the leaders, as we're reading here, have to be able to understand where their staff, their colleagues are coming from, their life experience, being able to inspire them. And also there's a sense that we're getting from these verses that everyone has the ability to contribute in their own way. So let's pause here and see where are you landing with some of these requirements for coming together as in an initiative like building the sanctuary, or any other kinds of initiative in your own lives that takes a team, a group. Oh, Jenny. Okay, I barely saw your hands. Now I see it.
Yeah, it's not great for this background.
Yeah, that's okay.
Abby, thank you for your teaching today. I want to go back to the Rashi because I have a question just to make sure I'm understanding what Rashi's saying. As to use my words, what I picked up from that is to have this ability to have knowledge, you first have to integrate intellectually and then emotionally and then spiritually. Is that sort of
Ooh.
what he's saying?
I think so. Yeah. I didn't quite say it exactly like that. I think that's perfectly well said. And yeah, I think that's great. Intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. Beautiful.
Okay.
Succinct and beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Other questions or reactions to all these different attributes? Do folks agree with my suggestions here, the ways in which I'm reading the text and the commentaries? Is there anything you would add? Andrea?
I just want to say something from my own experience
Okay.
as a teacher. The most important thing from my experience for being a good teacher is my enthusiasm for the subject matter. That it doesn't that the skill I bring is always the same, but my love for the material makes a difference as to whether or not I can present it. And that seems to be missing. There's nothing
Yeah,
in
that
here
is missing.
that says Vayekhel was dying to build a Mishkan. Maybe it's understood or assumed or something, but I find it fascinating that it's missing.
That is quite interesting. I would like to think about that for a few moments. Okay, let's think about that. And maybe if someone has that is quite interesting. I guess I'm wondering, Andrea, I wonder if at some point, if we think about the history of learning and teaching, if that starts to appear in the literature that we have, that, you know, a passion or an enthusiasm for the material starts to appear as a quality that teachers need. I'm trying to think about if I can think of anything in rabbinic literature. I would have to go back and check and think more about it. Okay, thank you. And I invite others to respond to Andrea too. Joanne and then Paul, and then we'll move on to some modern commentary.
So I agree that the love of learning was what propelled my 60 years as a teacher. But it's also, and that's not mentioned, is I was not a strong student. I understood differently, perhaps, than someone who just comes by it by osmosis of how to get it across in such a way that it was really learned.
Yeah. So also that's not really addressed here. Like, you know, the variety of different kinds of learners. We don't read about that here. You know, it makes me think of a couple things. The 4 children at the Passover Seder. The person who was just speaking, will you raise your hand again just so I can see you for as I respond? If she can.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh,
that's okay. That's okay, Mary.
Okay.
I don't remember her name, but maybe she'll just raise her hands one more time and totally fine.
Joanne.
Joanne. Okay, great. Okay, Joanne, thank you. We'll keep your hands up there just for a moment. So I'm thinking of the 4 children at the Passover Seder, for example, where we read about a child that doesn't really know how to ask questions. And in rabbinic literature also, there's a quadrant of descriptions about different kinds of learners. One of them is like a sponge and the other is like a funnel. And I have to go back and check the others. I don't remember, but maybe that is something we start seeing, but really not in these texts. And I can't think of another Torah text that speaks to different kinds of learners, but it is in rabbinic literature. So that's really interesting. Okay, Joanne, thank you. Paul, and then we'll go on. And if we could keep Paul's hands raised for his, yeah.
Yeah, I'll keep it raised.
Yeah, keep it raised just for your question and a response.
Yeah, thank you, Rabbi. You know, this is fascinating discussion today. This, you know, about inspiring people, and we talk about it at work, you know, as leaders, you know, inspiring heart and minds and so on. And up to now, like I've just been thinking, like collectively, but as far as leading, you know, what I might find, you know, super exciting and passionate, others may find very dry, and to try and get the message across, it's not a singular message like to each person. You have to kind of tailor it to the audience, right?
Right. Did you see that in the text? That tailoring
Yeah.
anywhere?
Yeah, so if I'm looking, so not just here, but like the whole building of the Mishkan,
Uh-huh.
you know, I'm not going to lie. Personally, it's not the most exciting to me. Okay, but if I'm an architect,
Mm.
I would find this super like the level of detail.
Mm-hmm.
I would find like really like I do find it interesting, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
have the passion for it.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm my passion is more on, I think the wisdom aspect, like, you need the smarts to build this thing and you need to know how to do it. But what's the desired outcome? Like, what are you looking to accomplish with this? And this is all about bringing, the collective people together and inspiring them to help God finish creation. I think that's what I get out of it. And I'm super excited about that.
Okay, great. I think also, as you were sharing about, not everybody finds everything interesting. We all find different kinds of things interesting. It made me think of before the person who talked about everyone, despite their, let's say, level of interest or varying kinds of connections to this sacred community and space. It was pointed out that the word every, whole is used multiple times, all. So there is this sense here that maybe even if everyone doesn't have the same kind of connection, there's a place for each person in building this Mishkan. And maybe the message here is there's also a place for everyone, even with varying levels of interest in the whole Torah and all of Jewish heritage. Let's just use that phrase for now, even though not every single individual part is going to be interesting. So thank you. Okay, we are going to go on, and if your thought, your question is relevant in a little bit, I'll invite you to share again. So there's one more piece here that I want to address, and I'm going to go back to the verses for a moment. Okay, bear with me for a moment. Well, we've been talking about, and I'm really coming back to today this idea that everyone participates in their own way through this phrase Nadiv Libo or Nadiv Lave. Some people might be familiar with the name Nadav, generally a boy's name, a Hebrew name that means gift. And as I mentioned, some form of this phrase is repeated like 25 times in this section on the Mishkan. So one of the pieces that I want to add to the mix, not only about multiple kinds of intelligence, as was said earlier, the cognitive, the intellectual, the emotional, the spiritual that we can all bring with us, and also even the material, but the building off of what we each can donate, what we each can give, this idea of our hearts moving us to give, is something that is picked up on by the medieval commentaries and modern. And I want to read one, maybe two texts about giving and generosity as another layer that we can learn from this whole section on coming together for an important, deeply significant initiative. So this brief passage here is from a book called the Musar Torah Commentary. As some folks here might be familiar with, Musar was an early modern movement that emphasized cultivating character traits, positive character traits, in order to better serve God in Jewish community. So this modern commentary pulls together several pieces of writing that focus on different aspects of our different character traits, like generosity, nidivut, like giving, in the context of the Mishkan. So briefly, I'll go ahead and read this. Beyond giving tzedakah, righteous giving, philanthropy, often colloquially translated as charity, we can think more expansively about nidivut, yidvenu libo, one of the phrases like nadiv lev that I read above, giving generously, willingly giving whatever you have from your heart is an act of loving kindness, an act of chesed, of love and kindness. Why should we be generous? Because generosity elevates our behavior and interactions. It enables our unique gifts to come into the world, and it reveals the truth of our interdependence. Striving to live with nidivut, generosity, is an aspiration to go through life hand in hand and in God's image, sustained by each other. So echoing what we've read above, and especially what was said at the beginning of the session, there is this understanding in these chapters about building the sanctuary, hearing the instructions, actualizing the instructions, and actually coming together under the leadership of Bezalel and Oholiab, that each person has a role to play in their own generous way. And if we're each generous in our own way, not pushing ourselves to be generous in exactly the same way, and in modern terms, we don't all have to give exactly the same amount to a campaign, but we all can give of ourselves and experience the interdependence of what it means to live productively in society. We can't do it all ourselves. And the Mishkan becomes this model based on this modern, this contemporary, insightful commentary. The Mishkan becomes this model for what it means to depend on each other's unique gifts, unique skills, unique talents as we build community together. So with that in mind, as our last piece, you can read the last one on your own. As our last piece today, I'll invite a couple more comments, your participation, and then we'll head off into our Fridays and Shabbat. So Deborah, you can go ahead and keep your hands raised for the moment.
Okay. So you mentioned dot, and it was fascinating. Yes, how I just want to know if I got your concept. Is it the application of, giving what you can, the best you can, or is it an insight? Is it like a thought thing, or is it an action thing? Can you just elaborate?
Well, sure. According to Rashi, according to one of the most well-known early medieval commentators, Da'at is actually what's called Ruach HaKodesh, holy inspiration, a divine spirit. So even though Da'at is the word we use today for knowledge, according to Rashi, it's not. It's Chokhmah, which is what we think about today, I would say, is a combination of wisdom, both combining our cognitive and emotional experience. He says, no, the first level of wisdom described here, chokhmah, is actually what a person learns, the way that you've kind of described da'at. Then there's the emotional, as was said earlier, so succinctly and beautifully. First, basic knowledge, then insight, and then there's this, perhaps da'at combines them. When we're able to combine them, perhaps we can really cultivate a sense of spirituality. But let me just say also, in the verses themselves, let me just scroll up here. You can see Robert Alter translates da'at as knowledge. So there is this a little bit, there's multiple interpretations of each of these terms, but I would say sometimes people have heard me talk about the distinction between pshat and drash. What's the context here? The linguistic context. It seems like I would say that da'at is essentially just knowledge, and I think I like Robert Alter's translations here, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. But Rashi says da'at is something a little different. It's Ruach HaKodesh. So I'll let you decide what resonates for you. But I think Rashi's definitions here are a little bit more of a drash, a little bit more of reading into the text.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to invite one more, but before I want to invite anyone who hasn't yet shared a reflection or asked a question. Would anyone like to have the last reflection from the group today? Anyone who hasn't yet shared? Otherwise, we're going to give the floor to Arnold. Okay, Arnold. The Zoom floor is all yours,
Okay. Sorry,
but you
I
got to
don't mean to
unmute.
be,
I think you're still muted.
No, he's
Oh.
unmuted.
I was
Okay, we
thinking,
can't hear you, Arnold.
I
I don't know
Abby,
why that is.
Abby, I think it's your headphones.
Oh, me? It's me?
I can hear Arnold.
can you hear me now? Yeah.
Okay, I don't know why my weird, okay. Anyways, okay.
Okay. I was just thinking that just a few chapters before, people did give very generously of things to build something, and that was the golden calf. They gave all their gold, but it was Aaron who put it together. And here, I think God is saying to them now, I do need a lot of materials, so you have to help me with that, but you've got to build this. And this is the alternative to the calf, because that was a God that you pray to. This is a building where I'm going to come to. And
Great.
it's an interesting contrast.
Great. Okay. Everyone can still hear me? Okay, my computer did something funny. So it's a great insight. I did not mention it earlier, but it's a great note to end on, that it's true in Exodus 31, when all the instructions are being given, we don't hear anything about generosity. We hear all these terms in Exodus 31 and 35, these terms about what knowledge is and what different kinds of intelligence are, but we don't hear anything about generosity until Exodus 35. And as Arnold said, what comes in between? It's the golden calf episode. And so it seems like when Moses got the instructions from God initially, what was left out? The sense of what it means to cultivate a desire, that affect, the kavanah, to want to give, to want to be part of a community. There wasn't perhaps enough of an inspiration. And then what do we read in between? The giving is distorted based on, the approach of the Torah. The people are suddenly giving to the golden calf. And finally, in Exodus 35, it seems like, the lesson was learned. It's not only that everybody has to come with their different kinds of knowledge and their different kinds of skill, and there's not just one leader and his assistant. Every single person has to be inspired to give. So it's a real, Arnold, thank you for bringing that up and allowing us to end with this added layer, that it's not only multiple kinds of intelligence and talent that are needed for all of us in our own communities to come together. It's also a sense of how we try and inspire each other to uniquely bring of our own gifts and to want to uniquely bring our own gifts and skills and talents and multiple kinds of intelligence to our communities. So with that, I will wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a restful weekend. And I hope you'll ponder and in your respective hometowns and communities, think about everything that you can bring and perhaps all the ways that you can inspire others to bring and to give to.
Thank you so much, Abby. And I just want to say that, of course, your in-person communities deserve your presence and your gifts and talents and knowledge. And I'm very grateful for all those things that you bring to this virtual space. So thank you for your questions and your comments and turning your cameras on and responding to each other in the chat. And if you feel that you have the ability to, we are always looking for Torah study sponsors. So I'm adding that to the chat. Of course, no pressure. Whatever gifts you bring to this space are so, so, so appreciated. And we wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.
Thank you.